Hello, my name is Matthew Margeson. I write music for film and television, and we're here today to talk about all things Rocketman.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks so much for inviting me back to your studio. So great to talk again.
Door's always open for you, Kaya. How are you?
Great. So you've been whirling away at this movie for quite some time now.
I have, off and on for nearly a year.
Yeah, wow. That's I remember a long time ago when you were like just starting out. So it's finally, I mean, it must be exciting to have be at the finish line.
We're just about there.
Yeah.
We have 4 or 5 days until it's released worldwide.
That's amazing. So before we jump into that, I know we did a nice big long interview last time, but just to kind of anybody who's discovering this now, I would love to kind of start with your kind of background, your kind of origin story, and kind of go back to the beginning. And do you remember kind of any kind of defining moments of your childhood or whenever in your life you decided like music is going to be part of my life, and then when did it become a career?
Yeah, the defining moment, I think we probably did talk about this last time, but to recap briefly, I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old, living in New Jersey at the time, and I went to see Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. And I always say I couldn't have really cared less about the show itself. I was more interested in the conductor and the orchestra and what was happening underneath the stage.
Right.
Got to kind of sneak up and talk to the conductor, you know, during intermission and ask him some questions, and that was just this is it. I need to be dealing with this behavior.
Because you developed like this passion for musical theater, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of my time in my youth both kind of being on stage doing some singing and dancing until I couldn't really cut that anymore. And then
what was the cutoff age?
Oh, I don't know, maybe, well, I started getting into doing musical direction for like community theaters and state theater groups, again, back on the East Coast, and took a real passion to just like leading those bands and learning all that kind of how to try to time the underscore to musicals to what was happening on the stage. It was cool. I mean, I took a real liking to it.
So at what point did you pursue the move out here? I mean, did you go to school for music?
I did. I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and they had a film music program.
Right.
So I studied film music there. I studied orchestral composition there. I did 2 majors there. And then I was also playing in a band at the time, a 10-piece funk band, which was really, really fun at the time. And I'm glad I got the rock and roll lifestyle out of my system when I was 20 and 21.
It seemed like that was a path for most
yeah,
composers. They're like, yeah, we did
great.
the rock thing, and now it's time to.
It was a lot. I mean, Jen, how many Motel 6s on the floor I just slept on? We were sponsored by Jägermeister. We had like a bus,
That's
and
amazing.
it was a trip looking back on it now. But after school, I stayed in Boston for a year, thinking, what the hell am I going to do with a music degree in composition?
Yeah.
And I really did want to pursue the film music thing, but while the band was kind of still going on, I didn't want to abandon that completely. And eventually things took their course, and the band dissolved. And my partner in crime, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we just packed up once she graduated. She also went to school in Boston. We just packed up the Ford Explorer at the time and drove across the country.
So was it? I mean, once you came here, like, was it excitement? Was it fear? Was it, did you have a job?
All that stuff.
Did you have a job lined up? Like, how did you kind of survive those first few years?
A lot of ramen and a lot of peanut butter and jelly. As soon as I got to LA, I was lucky enough to. There's a small music school for children in Santa Monica, and so I got a couple students there. And between that and waiting tables for the first year off and on, was able to kind of make ends meet barely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after I moved out here. It's probably about 4 or 5 months after I moved out to LA, I answered an ad online and got myself into Remote Control Productions, Hans Zimmer's company, as an intern for one of the composers here. And it was unpaid for a couple months until I kind of proved my value. And then slowly and steadily I was able to kind of quit the restaurant job, waiting tables, and stop teaching the kiddies the piano. And the rest is history.
That's amazing.
I've been able to kind of utilize being at Hans's company to work with people and to learn both the musical and non-musical components of this crazy city.
I mean, that's been. I mean, 5 months in, this has probably must have been the best education you could have gotten.
It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. It's just the graduate degree.
Yeah. And you started working with Jim? Is that?
I started working with Klaus Badelt.
Klaus, that's right.
Yeah, and it was a crash course in the technical kind of aesthetic of what we do. Klaus was, he's always pushing, or I haven't seen or talked to him in years, but he was always pushing what our computers can do and how we can utilize technology to in this field. And so while I had what I felt at the time was a really strong compositional background of music and harmony and theory and all this other things, I had really never touched an Apple computer before moving out here. So it was a lot of manual reading and figuring out how to navigate my way through that world.
Absolutely. And during those times, I mean, even now, even today in your career, I started talking with composers more about this lately. I just talked about with Alan Silvestri, and we talk about kind of the failures we do to kind of just how their learning experience. A lot of people shy away from talking about mistakes they make or things that they fuck up with, but it's such a important part to learn from. Is there any moments, like mistakes you made like early on in your career that you're like, I know never to do that again? Like there were kind of these.
I don't make mistakes, Kaya. No, of course. Anything that really pops out. Well, I stopped working. Let's not talk about mistake, but let's talk about gambles.
Yeah, gambles. Yeah, risks.
I stopped working for Klaus Badelt after about, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe 2 years after working for him as an intern and a tech assistant, and wasn't doing that much creative work. Kind of. Well, here's one mistake. I kind of got too good at making coffee. Where I was running his studio, and he had 3 or 4 studios that were duplicates of each other, and making sure they're all in sync, and staying up till 4 a.m, kind of doing the night duties of, well, he's worked all day, so now I have to kind of go and clean up things and ship things off to directors, and and so I wasn't, after that long, I felt I really want to grow in a more creative way, and there was another composer at the time whose career was just starting to really pick off, Jim Dooley, who we kind of chatted, and he was taking on some things where he could use someone to help with the organization. So I cordially left working with Klaus, and that was a gamble because Klaus was kind of he's A-list composer, and for me to kind of throw that away and start working with someone whose career is just starting to bloom was a definite huge gamble, and it proved to be a successful one because after a couple months, Jim really took me on as a musical apprentice, as well as keeping the shop running.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
That makes sense. So, he would kind of work till 10 p.m. and I'd kind of go in the middle of the night and kind of study his sequences and maybe kind of orchestrate a little bit of percussion to begin with, and it's just kind of the way the hierarchy was working in the city at that point,
And that led to working with Henry and Hans, so it blossomed into these more collaborative environments.
No, absolutely. And of course the gamble, once I had worked with Jim for a couple of years, we got super tight, and he was taking on a lot of work, and I got to help orchestrate some things and arrange a lot of his music with him. And then there was, a gamble to stop doing that and talk to Hans and, can I help you with some of your, can I take out this loan to buy a bunch of gear, and kind of landed on my feet one way or another.
That's amazing. Yeah. So during those times, I remember moving out here, and a lot of people moving out here, and even today I'm sure when you started Rocketman, do you ever encounter like moments of this like doubt? Like, how do I overcome doubt? How do I build confidence in myself? How do you wrestle with doubt and confidence in this profession?
You hope that the director likes the music, I think. Yeah. I think every time I start something new, you're with a blank canvas, and there's just this, how am I going to get this done?
Yeah,
I'm sure. I would hope that everyone has that same experience.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm super close with Hans, and I know he goes through that. On every single gig, you're looking at a blank screen or a blank piece of paper, and like, how the hell am I going to get this?
Yeah, even though you've done it so many times, it's still
40 minutes of music, but yeah, and you kind of slowly figure out one thing that might work and 6 things that don't, and if you have that one thing that works for one scene, it's just the initial pebble splash that hopefully you can build on and create some sort of musical world for that specific, hopefully, project.
Right. And I forget if I asked you this last time. If I did, we could explore it again. But where does the first note come from? Like, I know it's going to be different on every film or every project, but like, do you like to read the script? Do you like to just sit with the director? Do you like to wait for that first cut? Like,
if there's an opportunity to read the script,
if you're on that early,
if you're on that early, Rocketman's the perfect example where I got the script. Well over a year ago, and was able to kind of write a lot of music away from picture. I'll get into that story in a minute, none of which was eventually used. But you know, or maybe there's that one, I'm starting another film currently, which you know, that we have this whole idea of a temp score,
Right.
and there was one, you know, kind of sequence in the movie, a scene in the movie that they couldn't find the right temp score. So I've been asked to kind of make this the first thing we do, and that could hopefully establish a tone that we can build on for the rest. So, you know, in that situation, someone was given, okay, take a look at this scene specifically, and we have conversations with the director, and what do you want, how, and so yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that first note comes from, or I may be listening to something, I may be on my drive home from work listening to Mahler or some EDM or some Elton John or something, and there's one chord change, and I'm like, ooh, you know what, that's really interesting, let's see if I could, and then it kind of cascades from there.
So when you're working with directors as part of your job, you're going to encounter so many different personalities, different people. How's it different working like with someone like Dexter Fletcher, who you've worked with before, or for someone that you've worked maybe for the first time? Is there a really stark difference there?
No, definitely. There's a shorthand that this is my second time working with Dexter, and I've done, you know, 4 or 5 films with Matthew Vaughn now, and there's a definite shorthand, and for those two specifically, there's a definite. I mean, Dexter gives you a bit of a long leash, and he's a reactionary. I get to take more of a, well, this is what I think, and let me bring this to the table, and see how he reacts to it. It was very similar working with Tim. Matthew, we have these conversations, and he has a definite idea of what he wants.
Right.
I mean, he's not sitting there going like, well, now we need to do this, but tonally, and then we can, you know, I can kind of go back to the laboratory and try to shape that and take our conversation and turn it into something.
Absolutely. So let's follow that path that kind of led to Rocketman, because I think it all started, of course, you working with Henry on, was it first Kick-Ass?
It was the first Kick-Ass.
First Kick-Ass.
Yeah.
So that kind of was the first connection with Matthew Vaughn.
That was my first indirect connection with Matthew Vaughn.
Right. So, and it kind of followed up.
Yeah, then it followed up with Kick-Ass, and Henry and I did that as kind of a co-composition.
Kick-Ass 2, yeah.
Yeah, and he was just taking, his crew was blowing up then, and I think Matthew had talked to him about doing it, and he's like, I can't, I'm on so many movies right now, and I couldn't give it the attention.
Right.
And it was Matthew's, well, what about that guy that helped you on the first Kick-Ass, and can we bring him in, and, you know, we could kind of all do this together one way or another.
Right.
And so that was proved to be musically a successful collaboration, and then Matthew called for when he was just starting to write and get Kingsman underway, and he called and said, hey, let's get the band back together. He literally said, you know, it worked last time, same people, get the same mixer and same engineer and all, you know, and it's kind of become our nice little club to get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so Eddie the Eagle was the first time you worked with Dexter.
With Dexter.
Right.
Yeah.
And Matthew produced that, but that was, honestly, it's one of my favorite scores in the past, like I want to say, like decade. I don't want to like
so much fun.
Don't want to like, you know, pat your back too hard, but it was really great.
It was a really precious time for me because musically it was like so different than anything I had done, and it was just fun.
Such a breath. I mean, I remember. I think we did talk about it last time, but you got to play with all these amazing synths, right? You got to like kind of pull back that retro kind of sound for those big
since
Triumph.
You know, it's since with Stranger Things, it's since made and some others. I think 8th Grade has an amazing synth component to its score, and it has since made made a little bit of a renaissance. But you know, we were with Eddie the Eagle. Do we go Rudy? Do we go sports underdog heartfelt, or do we try to do that with the music of the time period?
Right.
And lucky for me, in my bank account, there was all these like old 80s synths that were just sitting in people's storage facilities and collecting dust because it hadn't quite made its full renaissance yet. And so I was able to go and just look on like Craigslist and eBay and get all this gear that people just didn't want. They were like paying me to take it. And I was able to kind of pull up some of those, what was you know, Mariah Carey or you know, some of these bands in the late 80s, what were they using for some of their, Mariah Carey's a terrible example, but like Daryl Oates, like what are some of these sounds that they were using back then, and kind of run with it.
And how did you know not to do too much? Because I feel like it's so easy to get so schmaltzy in a movie like that.
Yeah.
Like, how did you find that line of being really tearjerker versus not like, oh, this is cheesy.
Yeah, no, there's a fine line. There's a bit of cheese in it.
Yeah,
There's a bit of cheese
but
in Eddie
I
the
like
Eagle
cheese
for
on my.
sure. But
I like cheese.
yeah,
Nice
a
sprinkle a little
of
cheese.
Parm goes a long way. Dexter's really good at that.
Yeah.
Dexter knows when we're being too saccharine and we're being too schmaltzy.
Yeah.
And there's a definite difference culturally, I think, between the Brits and the Americans. You know, I mean, I'm all for the cheese. I am like, give me the box of Kleenex and let's get the emotion on.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's nice having someone there to pull you back from that and rein you down and know, and that's his job ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean,
To direct you.
to steer the ship in that sort of way. So it was a collaborative effort. Lots of conversations, lots of options, lots of, well, here's 3 different versions that are slightly different of this piece of music for this scene, and you know, let's chat about it.
And working with Dexter, because he's also an actor.
Yes.
Do you notice that he brings a different edge with that? It's like, oh,
he pulls performances out of actors almost better than any director that I know or have worked with. I mean, he really does. I think as a director, that's really where Dexter shines, is to know how to talk to the actors to really get what he wants out of them. I mean, you've seen it in Eddie the Eagle. I mean, I wasn't a part of it, but Sunshine on Leith, and certainly in Rocketman. When you see it, I mean, what he got Taron to deliver for that movie is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, and then that's like the trio's back together now again for Rocketman. You have Taron, and Dexter. So, starting when that movie came up, and he came to you, I mean, what were your first reaction? Like, hey, I got this thing. Do you want it? Was it immediately you got the part or got the job? Or
it was probably. I mean, the script has been floating around for years.
Yeah, because I remember.
It might have even been during the time of Kingsman 1 or Eddie the Eagle when Matthew and I were talking about, hey, would you be interested in like being a part of this Elton John thing that comes up? And I mean, my first stadium concert ever when I was 10 years old was Billy Joel and Elton John at a giant stadium in New Jersey. So to even be considered to be a part of something like that is just a trip. But yeah, I didn't really necessarily have to demo for it to get the gig or anything. I had the relationship with Dexter from Eddie that worked out quite well. I feel at that point I was the first or second phone call from Matthew to kind of get involved with things. And so it was just when we started up, and of course Matthew's dear friend and now my dear friend also is son of the late George Martin, Giles Martin, so a brilliant music producer. And so when we really started getting into the thick of it, him and his team really produced the songs for this film, and I wrote and produced the score. And as we got more into post-production, and even some of the pre-production, but those lines got blurred just a bit when necessary, for certain reasons, and it was just a really healthy collaboration to learn from someone that comes from a completely different musical world than I do, like Giles, you know, and it really was a completely different way about coming up with a product.
Yeah, so I mean, talk about when you first started the process, when you had to find the sound for the score. So you had the song team that was kind of course there were going to be these song pieces and these
most of them are all written into the script, so you knew what they were going to be. So you knew
where they were going to be and everything. So did you follow the song, like you followed Elton's music to kind of guide what the score was going to be, or did you try to counter it in any way with your music?
Well, what initially I did was I went out and wrote some themes, having just read the script. So this is while they were shooting. I kind of read the script and said, well, we certainly need something for Elton's struggle with his parents, for example. We certainly need something to represent addiction. We certainly need a young Elton theme. We certainly need some sort of musical behavior for his relationship with Bernie Taupin. And so I went and wrote a couple themes just on piano. It wasn't a full-on produced track or anything, but just some melodies that I thought we could pin down to the characters or these themes in the film. And we sent them to Matthew, we sent them to Dexter, we sent them to Giles, and everyone was on board. Everyone loved them. But what happened was that when I moved to London for 3 months to do the post-production with them once they were done shooting, and once I started kind of writing music for scenes using these new themes, we all, including myself, said, well, why are we trying to write brand new melodies for Elton John when he's written one or two that are really good? And so that became an exercise in which songs and how they are presented in the film can represent certain ideas cinematically, and how do we take Elton John's band and his songs and the piano, and how can we do that in a score fashion? And how can we make that cinematic? How can we kind of deconstruct them and pick intervals, for example, that you might be able to play on a synth or just on a solo violin, that as soon as you hear the first 3 notes, you know exactly what it is.
Right.
And how do we make that now try to represent an idea of the film, whether it be like his struggle with his parents or addiction or whatever it is.
Because there's certain musical sequences, like they would pick a song in a kind of a fantasy sequence that would be for his addictive part, or like this triumphant moment. So you take that and be, okay, I know what the emotion is that the song is representing.
Yes,
in
yes. And how do we, like you're talking about emotion, and how do we make one theme be tragic,
right,
in its presentation, and how do we make something, the same exact theme, be a bit more angst-filled and angry, or how do we make it joyous? And so so it was an interesting exercise of taking some of those completely well-known musical DNA and kind of presenting them in a storytelling way. What we had a really nice happy accident in the process of this, which we realized that there are 2 or 3 really known Elton John songs that just coincidentally start with the same 3 chords. And so I would play those 3 chords, and someone at Dexter would say, "Oh, those are the first 3 chords from this song." And no, those are the first 3 chords. Wait a minute, they're actually the first 3 chords for a couple different songs. So those 3 chords actually became a major theme in the movie, because you can interchangeably use them, and it reminds you of a couple different songs.
Right.
And the way the structure of the chords themselves are easily manipulatable to evoke different emotions, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, how much did Taron's performance influence it too? I mean, the songs are influencing, but I mean, his take on Elton.
If anything, Taron's performance has made everything easy. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy's just oozing with talent.
Yeah.
I mean, he not only, I didn't know this, I learned this during the process of the post-production, that the Welsh are infamously known for their singing.
Oh, really? I didn't know that either.
As a culture, they're good singers. So not only does he have that going for him, but he also, from my understanding, really worked hard for months with some vocal coach and some training on not how to sing it, but how to sing like Elton, with inflections and how to pronounce the vowels and how to, if anything, he made my job easier, because his performance, I mean, he just really transforms into Elton in this film.
And you've scored pretty much almost his entire career now at this
point.
Almost.
There's a couple that I narrowly escaped, but he, and it's always, I mean, whenever I'm working on a Taron scene, there's never in some cases we have directors, the scene's not that great, so we need music to help save it.
Right.
But that just doesn't happen when he's on screen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when the song team is working and you're working, I mean, how much communication are you guys having so you make sure that everyone's on the same page?
Lots.
So
absolutely. Especially with this. The one thing we didn't want to do with this movie was a musical, in the sense that there's a scene happening, and then all of a sudden the song here, you can tell when the song starts.
Right.
And so that's where I came in and had very close communication again with Giles, the song producer, to how do we go from score and melt into song in a really homogeneous and seamless and effortless way. So it's a lot of, let me write this and you write this, and we'll see what happens, and we're in the same key and we have the same size orchestra, and well, what if you mute that because I can, and so there was a lot of trial and error on how to get that, maybe the first verse of this song I'll actually have as part of my underscore, and someone just sings, and then slowly his Giles' drummer can start playing, or the guitars can come in or something, so it's not, here's a song,
So
so it was a great collaboration. It was a great experiment, and because the movie is so song heavy, I when I came on board, I said, look, I have the guys that I usually work with who are try to be as loyal as I can to and love working with, but I wanted to embrace, there's so many songs in the film that like, Giles, can I use your orchestrator? Can I use your mix engineer? Let's talk about the size of the orchestra that you're using for some of your songs, because I want I don't want people to be able to tell where score stops and song ends and score stops. So we just put the whole team together and all just worked together.
So I was like working with a co-composer. I mean, you had...
Yeah, it was great. And there are some pieces in the movie that, you know, a song will start and in the middle of it, it transforms into my score, and then it transforms back into the song and then back into my score. So it was just a really, I haven't really done anything like it before.
And I guess when you're hitting like these big musical scenes, I guess there's a question: is how do you score? Are you scoring it chronologically? Are you doing the kind of these big scenes at certain times and then kind of threading the needle between them? Like how did the process work structurally? Like, is it just like, okay, we're getting to this moment and then we have a song, or are you kind of figuring out the songs first and then figuring out the score, or is it all just at one
I think
time?
It was just a big homogenous process.
Yeah.
And we had, you know, throughout the course of the post-production, we had some test screenings with test audiences. And so we knew what wasn't working and what was. So things that we maybe had done and thought, oh, that's great, it's working great. You come back from a test audience screening and that song scores the lowest out of all the songs in the film. So what do we know? Let's go back to the drawing board and see if we can figure out a different execution of things. And even with the score, going back to my point about not having the score be too sentimental. There's about 35 minutes of pure score in the film, if you're to strip out all of the kind of cross-breeding scenarios. And a lot of them were just multiple versions of, you know, this is the one where we're really trying to pull the heartstring, but maybe we're spoon-feeding the audience a bit too much, so let's make it a bit beigeur and let the acting speak for itself. And it was a lot of, you know, trying to figure out where that needle should be.
Absolutely. So when you're kind of diving into, it doesn't have to be Rocketman, but anything, but your process, and you need to evoke a certain emotion, I guess where do you go headspace-wise to like get there? Do you just rely on what you're seeing on screen? Do you kind of reflect back on maybe a moment, like if you need to get like a sad moment, do you reflect on sadness in your own life, or I mean, do you make it autobiographical? Do you keep that separate? Kind of what is the process there?
I think I'm a pretty emotional person to begin with. I mean, if I go to see a show on the West End, or if I go to see a show on Broadway, or I mean, I'm bound to have tears at some point, even if it's not a sad moment, just the overwhelming quality of some emotion, of these productions.
You're a crier too, I'm a crier, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to shout that too loud, but I think there's a term for it as an empath.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
It's way
but
more better.
Someone that immediately can empathize with something that's going on and feel the same thing. So, I remember I was working on one of the scenes for Eddie the Eagle, when it's in the middle of the movie. I think it's one of the runs that he doesn't land and he becomes disqualified and doesn't progress on in the Olympics. And there's a beautiful scene where Taron's not even saying that much on the screen, but just acting, and his disappointment is coming through for his facial expressions. And I remember sitting literally right here writing it and like having to step away because I was like, I can't keep working on this scene. I was getting like welled up myself. I think it's just trial and error. I think timing's a lot of it. I think I struggle with timing quite a bit as far as, you know, if there is a tragic moment and I've written something that I really believe in, and I believe this is the money moment where we really want to pull it out of the audience. And I'll take that moment and like, oh, let's move it like 15 frames to the left. And let me go take a walk and come back and see how that feels. And then let me move it 2 seconds later so we can let the audience digest before we hit them on the head with the emotion musically. So I spend a lot of time doing that, moving things around and seeing what just sits right. So I don't know if that answers the question about emotion, but it's a lot of just trial and error. And you know, it's so kind of subjective to begin with. So there's no right answer.
Medium is
there's
subjective.
more wrong answers than the right ones. You know.
When I see people like attacking other people for what they like or what they don't like, it's like so ridiculous.
And
like online, and it kind of fuels that.
Yeah, you kind of have to ignore all that fat because you know you have the one thing I've learned too when I listen to scores or go to see movies and say, well, that was an interesting decision musically to do that. It's like, well, I have no idea the history. It could have been something completely different that the composer did and the director or some producer or someone with a suit and tie at Universal. If I was like, no, we need to change that, and they may have seen it once, and so you just never know.
And it's a lot of people also forget, at least when it comes to music, you are serving the director, and
absolutely.
So and everyone's trying to make the best thing that they can make.
Yeah.
So no one's out there trying to make shit. Like,
I wish, everyone should have that mindset and realize that you're all working towards the right goal. And on Rocketman, I was lucky enough to. It was just a mutual respect and love fest of, let's just make the best thing possible.
Did you get to meet with Elton at all?
I did get to meet Elton.
Wow.
Which was just. I mean, I don't know what the right adjective would be for that, but he and Bernie Taupin wrote a song for the end credits.
Oh, nice.
And so when Giles and I were recording, we recorded the track for that and kind of got things in order, and then had him and Taron come in to record the song, to record the vocals for it. So I was kind of there with him the whole day doing that session. And I mean, the guys, when he goes into the booth, and as wonderful as Taron is at an actor and at singing, when Elton goes in to sing his lines in the song, you're like, oh well, it's Elton John.
Yeah.
There's just no mistaking that he's a force.
I saw him when he was when he did his residency in Vegas. My wife and I went. It was actually at the first trip we did as a couple, and it was like at the Coliseum there, and it was like fantastic. Like, I missed his show in LA though. He's doing his final kind of farewell tour.
Yeah, he did some shows in LA in January, February, I believe.
Yeah.
But I believe he's actually.
I think he's coming back.
He's coming back, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. I don't know the details, but I don't think he's completely.
Yeah,
done.
it's like a 3-year farewell tour.
Yeah,
So looking at your career now, do you think experience, I'm not just like working on movies, but just living life. I mean, you're a father now, you're a husband. Do you think that has made you a better storyteller? Do you think living...
I hope so.
Yeah. Do you think you're a different storyteller than you were like 10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes from doing more scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And looking and knowing how to look at things, and knowing how to, be just more mature as far as looking at a scene and knowing certain things like perspective, or just having a little bit more experience on knowing, like I said before, like how much are we spoon feeding the audience here, things like that. But and of course there's the really tangible components of it. Like when I became a father, my day shifted from working from noon till 4 a.m. to like now 6 till dinner time or 8 till dinner time or whatever. And sometimes when the deadlines are on, you push on into the night. And of course, certain you prioritize certain things differently in your life, and of course, being a father evokes certain emotions that you didn't know you had before that.
Right.
So yeah, I think all those things kind of go into the ingredient pool of what I can output. But certainly doing it more, and I hope that's the case. And it's just there's the whole 10,000 hour rule. But
you're still learning. I mean, every day.
Oh, you just never stop.
You'll never stop.
Yeah,
You'll
why
be growing
would you?
forever.
If you say you've learned it all,
Just I'm done.
and then throw in, of course, trends and how filmmaking is changing and how storytelling is changing, and it's certainly different than it was 5 years ago and 15 years ago and 40 years ago, and it's always kind of evolving, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, how has that affected you? I mean, are you like more? Do you have to stay aware of like what the trends are? Do you always like listening and looking at what other people are doing?
Well, sometimes if things are slow, you're like, oh, there's someone came out with a new album, and I have my kind of geeking out. John Debney came out with a new album. To see what he did, and that goes back to my youth of who were the people that inspired me to get involved in this stupid world. But yeah, I think that I don't listen to things to say what are the trends, what am I doing, what am I gonna take from that, or I try to listen for enjoyment's sake, but what's going on. You watch enough Netflix and Apple movies and stuff to know what's going on. But I think part of the goal is to also do enough slightly differently that you're also part of the team that's pushing things forward.
Absolutely. And so you've worked on this massive Elton John picture. if you could take any other kind of big musical artists that, if you your wish, Genie granted you a wish to do another musical biopic, who do you think deserves one, and what would you like to work on?
The thing about Elton's music is that he's such a colorful. I mean, growing up, I will admit, I mean, a piano player growing up, primarily, so Elton was right up there with what I was playing when I was 13, 14, 15. Billy Joel kind of slightly topped that just because of the American component of everything, and Blue Collar, he is a very specific target audience, I think, Billy Joel.
And you're in Jersey, so...
Oh, I mean, it's right down the street, Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
But Elton brings also just this crazy, wild, colorful personality that some of these guys, like, I mean, who are David Bowie would bring something like that, you know. And so it'd be hard to top being able to, and with Elton, because of that, what he brings personality wise to this story, we kind of didn't have any rules, if that makes sense. I don't know. I think, I mean, maybe, let's rephrase the question. I think that a really good Sinatra biopic would be amazing. Whether or not I worked on it, I think that'd be a life that would be, especially because I'm sure there's a lot of darkness there. That we all just think of like him singing New York, New York, and you don't realize all the shit that's going on backstage. There's a really great Bob Marley documentary that came out. It's quite lengthy, but that came out a couple years ago. It was not a musical, but Bob would be someone to explore that could be cool. He led a really interesting life that I think we all kind of we kind of blind ourselves to kind of some of the more negative things
it's amazing
that he's done,
how these big, these names live these lives, and I guess going back to Rocketman, I think it seems like you were able to stay away from those kind of biopic archetypes, but still explore kind of the path that you expect of an artist having their ups and downs, and then kind of that.
It's a dark movie. I mean, it's got its moments of. I went to a screening last weekend with some people of the film, and it's an advanced screening. No one has seen it, and there's a point in the movie in which everything kind of it shifts, and a buddy of mine that I was watching with, he turns to me and he goes, "Well, shit just got real, didn't it?" And so where and I think to the inevitable comparison is going to happen with Bohemian Rhapsody,
of course,
which I thought was a fantastically entertaining film.
Right. And Dexter worked on that.
Dexter worked on that, and especially what Dexter and John Ottman were able to do with that last Live Aid sequence is just amazing. An achievement in musical cinema. Is just fantastic. But we'll call a spade a spade. The movie is a very tame version of Freddie Mercury's life.
Right.
And we didn't. It's not. Rocketman it's pretty brutal. There's some pretty tragic and dark and tension-filled scenes that are that lead us down the path of addiction, and how that can really screw up your life and drive people away and kind of turn relationships on their side. And
because I know at the Bohemian Rhapsody, I think Queen, they were kind of monitoring that film pretty closely, and
from what I hear, they were involved.
But was Elton like you? Was he kind of hands off, or
no? He's a producer on the film.
Okay,
so he was involved. He certainly wasn't there day to day.
Right.
But I think at the very beginning.
But he didn't filter you. He said go.
No, not at all. From the very
get
go, Elton said, "Tell my story. Tell the good. Tell the fun. Tell the bad. Tell the dark. Tell the And when we got to these milestones, whether it was we're going to have a test audience screening, or we've gotten to a certain spot, let's send it to Paramount and let's send it to all the producers. So he would weigh in, and kind of steer the ship peripherally like that. But like I said, he wasn't there, and I know he had a big part in approval of Taron being involved in portraying. The other thing that's slightly different about this and a lot of the other conventional biopics is that Elton and Bernie are still alive.
Yeah, that's true.
I had the opportunity to spend like a whole day and a half with Bernie Taupin, and he was just saying how he was at his like hotel gym on a treadmill with all these people around him just working out while there's a advertisement on the TV for Rocketman, and he's like, how fucked up is this that like there's someone on the screen playing me. I'm just in this gym running, and I'm still alive. And like, have we all earned this yet and everything? But I think they're both very, very pleased with the outcome.
I mean, it's also rare to see that because, usually these stories are told after the artist passed away, and then it's like it becomes like, okay, how much is it creative liberties? But if you have the artist there, kind of be like, no, this is how it happened, and this, I think that's
and there are a lot of creative liberties,
of course,
in this song. Without giving too many of the details away, the film is told from the perspective of Elton.
Yeah.
In rehab. So he's retelling his life story. His another pun. He's retelling his life story, and so you're literally going into his brain, and you're getting some of these things are a little bit factual, and some of them are like from his perspective in a slightly inebriated state sometimes.
Right.
And there's some timeline chronological facts that have been skewed a bit just it's poetic license.
Of course, it's a film. It's not a documentary.
We didn't make this movie for people to say, well, that song wasn't made in that year, so you guys are not factual. We know it's all.
You'll still get those
fine.
people.
Yeah, of course you will. And thanks for pointing it out.
Thank you. We noticed. So looking back at the whole experience of just Rocketman, what was like your favorite? Is there like a pinnacle moment where like, that was amazing, whether it was like recording or whether it was...
It's always recording.
Yeah, it's just when you see that music come to life.
Yeah, it's when you get the 60, 80 piece orchestra in there. And we did a lot of choir work on this. We have like full on like James Horner glory boys choir arrangements of Rocketman and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And so, we try to mock these things up with our samples and with the fake orchestra and everything. And when you get everyone in the room, that's always the best part, And of course, working with Taron and working with Elton briefly, but being able to kind of hang with him was a trip. And working with Giles, I mean, the guy comes from a very band-oriented career of remixing a lot of the Beatles stuff and working with, more band behavior than orchestra, and so that was a different process for me. Because we tried to integrate, what instruments are you using on that song? Well, my cue that's leading into that song, let me get some of those players to play on that cue that's going to go in. So it was just a different experience. It was a very...
I love that too, because you don't see that. Usually it's the songs are done here and the score is done here.
Yeah, no, we wanted to make it a really seamless thing, and the process was different for me, because I come from a very meticulous, okay, this cue's been approved, so we've got these strings, they're going to start at 7 o'clock. It'll take probably 25 minutes, but let's give us a 24 to 28 minute buffer to record. And I think the band world's slightly different than that. It's, let's get some gospel singers in, see what happens. And do we need to prepare parts? No, we'll just jam with them and see, we'll get something down, So it was great. It was a really positive learning experience for me, and I hope for him as well.
I'm sure,
think I brought something to the table as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're working in that way, of course, with every film, you have picture changes, you have the cut changes. When you have this kind of blending of score and song, and if they chop a few frames here or there, how does that? Did that happen in this film?
It did, and it just gets more. Picture changes always just add a different dimension.
Right.
And now
was it any different than working on just conforming score to fit certain things, or was it like a different beast altogether?
It was, in the sense that with score, especially with something that's not kind of driving at a constant tempo, there can sometimes be a little bit of ebb and flow and malleability to how things are hitting. If there's a conversation and they've taken out 3 frames there, but the cue still works, so we'll leave it alone. Or, oh no, it's actually sitting a little bit differently, which is quite nice now. But when you're dealing with people on screen singing and they make changes, you need to be frame accurate, or else the song's not going to match with their voice, obviously. So that was a little bit of a challenge for some of them, especially because some of the songs that were shot, there was like 5-minute versions of that song shot, and then now all of a sudden we've got a 3.5 hour film, and so where are we? What's going to end up on the cutting room floor, and what are we going to get rid of? And so there are some songs that, like I said, were initially like 3-4 minutes long that have been chopped down to a minute 20 or something, So.
Absolutely.
The inevitable tail chase of picture editing.
So to I mean, congratulations! I mean, that's just an amazing accomplishment. And
Thanks.
I mean,
Thank you
I know
very
you've been
much.
working on it so hard, and I haven't seen it yet, so I can't wait to see it. I was actually going to try to go see it. They had like a Fandango early access, but I couldn't make it.
Make
But
sure you see it in a good theater.
ArcLight, baby, all the
I
time.
went to the Fandango screening.
Oh yeah, where did they show it?
Well, I don't want to go bashing movie theaters.
Please, I bet you.
It was
If it was an
a
AMC,
small. It was a very
I work
small
for AMC,
theater
you can-
in Santa Monica.
Okay.
And I was like, is it in mono right now? Because the sound system just it wasn't.
If it was an
up to
AMC,
date.
it could have been.
It wasn't. It wasn't up to date. It was my first time seeing it in a theater with the public, and as soon as the movie starts, it's like, oh.
Oh crap.
But I did go to a second screening a couple days ago in a really nice theater on the East Coast, and it redeemed the.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm
riff-raff
definitely going to
theater.
go to ArcLight. So,
Yeah.
just want to find out. I know we were talking about musical theater earlier.
Yeah.
And I know you even worked on briefly, like Into the Woods. I think you did some stuff
Yeah.
on that. Like, so if you had to, so many musicals. I've seen a little bit of a renaissance of like pure musicals. If there's like a Broadway show or anything that you would love to work on to turn into a film, what would it be?
Well, the great thing about Rocketman, it's not a musical.
Exactly.
It wasn't a musical. We've
Right.
kind of made it into a musical. I think they're really tough. I don't
Yeah.
think there's a lot of them that have been made. I'm embarrassed to say this. I haven't seen Les Mis yet, the film.
Neither have I actually.
And,
No, I haven't.
absolutely love the show. I've seen all the Phantom of the Opera movies.
Yeah. Do you think they've done it justice or no?
It's tough. It's really tough. Even the I was 17 when Rent came out
Right.
on Broadway. And I
Oh,
was
that's right.
just-
Well, we got Spielberg doing. I mean, Spielberg's he's doing West Side Story, right?
Yeah, Spielberg's doing West Side Story.
Yeah.
I believe there's a couple. I mean, I think Little Shop might have been Greenlaw. I'm not quite. There's a couple of them. It's Fiddler's not. No, it's West Side Story.
Right.
Yeah, they're just tough. Sometimes they don't translate that well. I thought Rob Marshall, without being too biased, did an amazing job with Into the Woods.
Yeah.
I thought it was really good. I thought
I like
all
9
of them,
too. I think he directed 9. Didn't he direct 9?
he did. He directed Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah.
But who directed 9?
Chicago was great too. I mean, he knows what he's doing with and with that genre. He really knows how to get it done.
Yeah.
So, ones that haven't been. I mean, Cats. There's some really good music in Cats, but there's not much of a story there, is there?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stories there.
Maybe it could be an animated. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, inevitably we'll get Hamilton someday. I would love to be part of that because you could actually make that huge. You could make that. You have
It's
the
such a
whole, you have
cultural
all
thing
the
too,
colonies.
yeah.
You have Philadelphia. You have Boston. They could really make that a wonder. New York. They can make it a wonderful world. You
Yeah.
know? I would imagine the set designer would be like a pig in shit working on something like Hamilton. Costume designs. Would be amazing.
Yeah.
A very big Hamilton kick right now. What else is there? There's a really wonderful musical that I just saw for the first time. I didn't even know much about it, called The Falsettos.
I haven't heard of that.
And it's a really small cast, but I could see it would be interesting to see something like that, like that's not but maybe turned into
Right. Yeah.
a huge. Inevitably, Dear Evan Hansen, if it hasn't been turned into a movie already, right? No, it's.
No,
I think it
I
just
don't
came
think
out
so.
like 2 or
Yeah.
3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's done right, I would love to be a part of any of them. It's,
Well, that's fair enough. But Matt, thank you so much for your time, for
You too.
talking,
You
for
too, Kaya.
exploring your
Thank you.
process, and congrats, man. It's I know you worked so hard, so congrats on Rocketman. I think
you.
great reviews, so I'm so happy for you.
Thank
So,
you very
thanks.
much. I really appreciate it. I hope you love it when you get to see it.